Alright, so my project was on safety features in newer cars and if they're really useful or if the bigger cars from the past, and titled that Longer Car, Longer Life. The old timers, blueprints were made for cars as early as 1898 by Henry Ford and Oldsmobile. But it wasn't until 1908 that headlights were introduced. 1936 turn signals were introduced. Before that, they used the manual hand signals. I don't know if you guys have ever used them when you're riding a bike. Well, I don't know. And then in 1946, backup lights were introduced. And these are all features that come on cars now that we wouldn't even be able to buy without them. So I have a video. It's kind of boring at the beginning, but it gives you an idea of what the first cars were like. This guy bought one and restored it.
Hello, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger, as if you didn't know.
My name is Chuck Parcell. I live in Mount Prospect, Illinois. What you were looking at here is a 1935 window coupe, Model A Ford. First came across the car, a friend of mine told me that there was an old car for sale, and they had it in the barn. So I went to take a look at it in the barn, and sure enough, I bought the thing for $100. And I come driving it home, and my dad said, "What are you going to do with that thing?" You know, and I said, "Well, I'm going to try to teach myself how to do something with it." You know, got it cleaned up and got it to running. Well, then he drove it to town, and then when my dad came back, he said, "There's a guy up there that'll trouble your money on your car." I said, "I don't want to sell it." So I've had it ever since. What I used to use the car for is I used to use the car to drive it back through the woods. I went squirrel hunting or deer hunting and stuff like that. One day I drove it back in the woods, it was all cold and froze up, and the next time I started to come out of the woods with this thing, I went to a wet spot and I hung it up. I buried the thing and all the way to the running boards. I had to go back to the house and get the man, a friend of mine, the tractor, and we had to come back in there and pull it out. Well, from that day forward, he said I was the only guy he'd ever heard of could ever hang up a Model A. And I said,
Okay, I just want to stop there and point out that this was made before we had the road systems that we do today. So these cars were built where they had to get through deep ruts that were made by basically goat paths that cars made to get around.
It was fun. It was really fun. When I got the car and slowly took it apart, started to try to restore it, try to teach myself how to restore something. Various books, you know, how to. I did a few things and I redid them a couple of times, you know, try to get them right. The transmission is just a normal little 3-speed standard age transmission, first, second, and third. They're reverse. And they used to call them crash boxes because if you didn't double clutch it, you kind of grind the gears a little bit as you shifted it from
Double clutch is just what it sounds like on a standard. With these, we have synchronized gears in standards now, which means that like from first to second it'll shift easy. Sometimes you don't have to use a clutch. But with these, you could strip the transmission, grind the gears if you didn't double clutch, which means you had to push the clutch in once, release it quick, and then immediately push it back down because that stopped the transmission from turning.
One gear to the other. So. This car comes equipped with a rumble seat. Ford put step plates on the bumper, one on the fender. In order for you to get into the rumble seat, you use these step plates and then you stepped on into the rumble seat. It would be kind of tight for a great big guy, but most of the time the kids usually rode in the back.
And that's where we put the kids.
What we have here is a Ford option that Ford let you have. And what it did is it had a rack on the back for your trunk or your suitcases, so you had someplace to put your luggage when you went on long trips. First thing I do to start this car is I push the clutch in, and I make sure it's out of gear. I pull the emergency brake back, I pop out the ignition, turn the gas on, and touch the start. It's all stopped. You can go down the road with it, 45, 50, real easy. The driving is the same today as it was when it rolled off the assembly line in 1930. I mean, it's just, it's no power steering, you got all the power you can muster in your arms to turn this car around the corners and stuff like that. Clutch, you gotta push that clutch down and you gotta hold it down with your foot so there's no automatic or anything like that. Turn signals, you gotta use your arm to stick your arm out the window and do the regular manual turn signals on this car. But it's, like I say, it's a fun car. It's really a fun car.
Okay. So that kind of gives you an idea of what they were like before that. Alright, the safety features of newer cars that we have now. Airbags common in every car, whether you go to the highest brand to the cheapest brand. The first patent was in 1953. The auto industry fought that though, because they felt that the new safety features would cause people not to buy the car. So it wasn't until 1970s that when they went to the Supreme Court that the Supreme Court ruled that they had to start incorporating these. And actually, Ford put seat belts in their cars 1950, I think, but it actually did decrease their sales. GM beat out Ford by over 200,000, I think, in sales that year. But the first airbags were only placed in the steering wheel for the driver, and now they're throughout the car. We have side airbags, passenger side airbags. Mercedes just came out with airbags in the seat belts, I believe. And then between 1990 and 2003, over 230 deaths were confirmed as a result of airbag deployment. Which doesn't seem like a lot, but it really is just a bag full of air coming out. And a lot of people, suffer neck injuries from that. They've done tests. It's not 100% guaranteed that, an airbag will cause neck injuries, but the rate is still pretty high compared to what it was before they had airbags when you just had the collision. Seatbelts, like I said, they were introduced in 1973. Ford incorporated that into the seatbelt in the 1950s. Anti-lock brakes, those are standard on cars now. In 1990 they started doing that. They were developed to maintain stability and controlled steering. The system automatically pumps your brakes 15 times a second. And that happens if your wheels start spinning front wheel drive or rear wheel drive, which makes a big difference. Instinct to a driver is to steer the opposite way that the car is spinning, or let up on the gas. And when anti-lock brakes kick on, what they do is they actually stop power to the drive wheel that's spinning and transfers power automatically over to the other one. That caused a lot of fishtail with rear wheel drives. Front wheel drive, it can totally throw your car off to the side. And the newer cars are lighter, which causes the tires not to maintain as good a grip on the road. And the ABS, is automatic braking system, has been found that it activates more often. And like I said, with hills is a big thing with front wheel drive cars. If you don't have really good tires because they're light on the front ends anymore, they don't pull the hills as good. And actually, people have reported that their cars actually spun all the way around and headed back down the hill from anti-lock brakes. Alright, and a lot of people have reported that they can they slide through stop signs. Icy roads uptown, I know driving with my anti-lock brakes, they'll kick on and you don't even know it because you don't know you're sliding, and you can go through traffic lights and stop signs, which isn't good. You know, if you get lucky and there's nobody coming, it's alright, you can recover, but traction control, that cuts the power to the spinning wheel, front or rear, and applies the power to the opposite wheel, similar to anti-lock brakes. An actual story, the car's traction control activated, and the driver was unable to correct the problem because it took her control away. When the car's traction control kicks on, when they first came out with it, you couldn't turn it off. It kicked on and it was on until the system sensed that the car was back in unstable roads. And the car finally stopped when the automatic transmission stalled, but not before the car crossed over the yellow line. The woman driving remarked when she was done, it was a mistake that could have been fixed in less than a second, driving a 1908 Model T. After 100 years of innovations, Mercedes has completely removed driver from direct control of the vehicle without an option to turn off those so-called features. Traction control, yes, it can be good. It helps a lot of drivers, but sometimes in this situation, she didn't feel she was going that fast, but just because that car slipped a little bit, it threw the entire balance off. Like I said before, her instincts weren't working because the car was going against them. Child safety locks, that was one of the better features that they came out with, but we all know our parents, grandparents, they survived cars without child safety locks. Well, actually without most of these. There's a switch in the rear doors that only allows the door to be opened from the outside and renders the inside handle inoperable. Like I said, they used them before, but they hadn't. One story that I found on the databases was a woman lost her 2-year-old son. She was leaving a relative's house, and according to law, she had buckled both of her kids in. She had a daughter that was 1 year old, still in a car seat. Obviously, the 2-year-old was too. But he reached for the back door handles, and for some reason, he fell out of his car seat. When he fell out, he was thrown underneath the rear wheels. A lot of people, I found the same story on a blog, and a lot of people said, you know, it was an accident that could have avoided if she was using the child safety locks, and a lot of people said it was a freak accident. As long as the kid was strapped in to the car seat, it really shouldn't have mattered. So that caused a lot of disturbances too. They wanted to start renewing policies on how you strap your child in, you know, and they're getting more and more safety features for kids every day. Safety of a bigger car. The length, width, and weight of new cars is drastically decreasing at a constant rate, and anybody that's seen older cars knows that. And a lot of people feel that the safety features are all the protection that they needed. And sometimes these features actually cause more problems, and I'll get into that. Smarter features, dumber drivers. A study watched the driving behaviors of several hundred people before and after safety features were mentioned, and before all the standard were on car over a 10-year period. That was beginning in the 1990s when they had the anti-lock brake. The result was that drivers actually became more, they were worse off. They felt that the safety features were all that they were going to need on the road, and the safety features would correct the problem. So they started driving faster, you know, in worse, more hazardous conditions. And automatic correction when driving into the left lane and automatic stopping when objects are in front of the car are two of the more recent features that they came out with. A lot of your higher end cars have these, but it's basically allowing the driver to relax. You know, they just think, you know, if I look into the back seat or check in my mirrors and something runs out in front of me, the car's going to stop itself. So they don't focus on the road as much as they should, and inevitably that's going to cause more problems. It's all well and good until that system fails. It's all electrical, shortages. That stuff can fail at any point. Rollover death rates has increased a lot. In 2009, there were 8,267 deaths due to rollovers. This is more than a 10% increase just since the 1990s when cars were a lot larger. Experimental tests and several studies show that rollover rates are increasing because cars are lighter weight. They also have a shorter wheelbase, and the wheelbase is just the length of the car from both wheels, left to right, width of it, basically. SUVs see that a lot more too because SUVs really aren't as heavy as people think they are, and because they make them taller now with a shorter wheelbase, it doesn't take very much to roll one of those over. To prove this point, smaller vehicles are unable to accommodate for the force of impact, which is basically standard Newton's law of motion. The harder something hits, the more it's going to affect it. The occupants oftentimes become squashed inside the car. That's not a real technical term, but that's basically what happens. The front end of the car comes back in so far because it's such a short crumple zone that the front end of the car hits the driver. And crumple zone is basically just the front end of the car where it's been built so that it kind of crumples up into sections instead of just being shoved back to the driver, which it has helped a lot, but still. So this video.
Hello, I'm Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Again.
As if you didn't know.
These are all older cars that were smashed, larger cars against smaller ones.
Mm-hmm.
And that still, the larger car, even it came back to the dashboard, but it didn't throw the car as much, so even the aftershock wouldn't be as bad. Oh.
And Paula dominated. Yeah. Don't they get that? Where's the motor at? Ain't seen
Those cars.
They might be survivable.
Yeah. Would hurt.
Yeah.
Hurt. Definitely be some pain there.
even more hurt, man.
Geostorm.
Sit down.
The Buick down there.
Yeah. Park Avenue, clearly one of them.
Ow. It's a bad day.
The front end view, you'll really get what happened.
That was a bad day.
Oh my gosh.
Is this why you drive a Buick?
My mom drives a Buick. Oh, we got a LeSabre. It's pretty close to the Park
She
Avenue.
did newer cars. Oh, Hummer.
So that was just kind of give you the visual aid of why people drove bigger cars back then. I have two videos here.
At Monte Carlo Inns, we're the first to admit there's no place like home. So let us welcome you to the next best place, where guests...
Alright, this is a crash test for, I believe they're both 06 Toyotas, one's a Camry and one's a Yaris. My biggest point that I was trying to make that were older cars were bigger, they were better, they were safer. Through research, though, I found a lot of people say you really can't compare the older generations to the generations of the newer ones. Which, with standard safety features that they've got now, it does make a difference, and it was difficult, to find people actually comparing, like the crash tests. Those were all the same year models that we've seen, but a lot of people won't even, they won't do a test like that with older models and newer models. So I found this one, and Camry is still a larger car than the Yaris, so it shows a larger car now with modern safety features.
Oh, yeah, he's dead. The door.
Yeah.
Just
Some
Trump hockey.
confirmation.
Someone had to point it out.
Oh.
Oh my gosh, they're dead. They're just
Like his head is just.
Yeah, so you guys got this. I mean,
Which is why they now do side airbags.
right,
Door pops open.
it's just, it's the whole point, Even with features like that,
We're in that situation.
I'm pretty sure
Still
airbag
on.
broke my head on.
so yeah, that was bad.
The crash wasn't bad.
Sorry. Alright. This is also a newer car. It's an 03 Ford Crown Victoria. I don't know if any of you guys have ever seen them, but they're pretty good sized cars.
It's the old cop cars.
Yeah, it's a car. I just wanted to show this, that these were mainly two-car collisions, but when you have a car that hits a solid object, it makes a big difference. I'm going to tell you, my uncle had a senior skip day. My grandfather was driving a 1972 Ford Fairlane, I think. Okay, well, he took the car and basically ran it up a tree down in Frewsburg. Okay, everybody in the car walked away fine. My uncle does not have a driver's license, so I'm going to tell you now that he also tried to jump a creek with it. The car back then would not... You guys want that? I can put it back on, but...
Damn now.
Alright. So, with that car hitting, and I forgot how fast it was going. But, this is still the hood. It hasn't even reached the windshield yet. Like you saw with the shorter cars, that front end, it crumples, but it'll crumple clear back to the windshield, break it. There are a lot of videos out there that show, actual coming right through the dash. A lot of people have had, died because they've been hitting the chest with the steering wheel where it's come back, even with the airbags. And that was one of the biggest fears with the older cars, was that when they were hit, if they didn't crumple, sometimes the engines would come right back through the dash. There wasn't a whole lot in the interior to protect it. No airbags, just clear metal. So they have made some advancements in that. Show a whole lot of that. Now, I also found a video, but it didn't work, so I'll just explain it to you. They took a 2009 Cadillac DeVille and a 1969 Cadillac sedan, ran them up to 65 miles an hour in the desert, and collided them. The front end of the 09 Cadillac was pushed to the windshield, busted the glass, and parts of it were actually pushed back in almost to the back of the driver's seat. The older Cadillac didn't fare as well as I thought it was gonna, but it did a lot better. The doors did come open, which 69 Cadillac might have had seatbelts, I'm not really sure. But the front end of that protected the driver from anything going through it. Nothing was pushed back to the driver's seat. Obviously, that was one of the big things, was drivers hit the steering wheel most often, but I explained earlier there was 230 deaths with airbags where people have snapped their neck, so it's debatable on whether it's really worth it or not. And they cost a lot more too, you know. I mean, you have to consider that they cost. Okay. So that was it for the presentation, but I got this and I wanted to show it just in general. You guys have seen the cars, but I think that the whole general rule kind of holds true for everything. Does anybody want to come up and play with bounce ball? Alright. Two, anybody want to help him? You can have the next one.
What I do?
Alright, I want you to throw them. Hold it about eye height for both of you. Lucas, you might have to hold it a little lower. But I want you to throw them, and then you guys are just going to have to count how many times it bounces and how far it rolls. Alright? Or I can count.
You gotta hit them somehow?
No, you just bounce them on the floor.
Oh, okay. I thought you were hitting me.
No.
That's really hard. So you're gonna hit them on the
Guys
floor?
got good aim. Yeah, just throw them down on the floor. One,
Good.
2, 3.
I didn't count.
Obviously, the little one's going farther. Josh's, his didn't roll as far either, which is another big thing. The rollover rates, that's in ditches can happen. The newer cars aren't built to withstand the aftershock, so when that car, a newer car hits the ditch, it bounces back, and that a lot of time causes the car to roll over. Where obviously a bigger car is going to hit and it's kind of going to stick there. I think my car weighs around 4,500 pounds, so that's an extra 500 to 1,000 pounds lighter than what the newer cars are, or heavier than what the newer cars are. So when it hits, it's just going to stay. Alright, this one weighs slightly more than Josh's. So that was a newer model car with plastic, my personal opinion. And Josh's was also a newer car, but kind of similar to the Camry and the Yaris. Now I'm going to give Lucas this one. This is going to represent an older car made out of metal compared to a newer one.
Can you two get closer so I can get both of you? Not that close.
Very good.
That's good.
Alright, so you guys are going to throw them or drop them and count how many times.
Ready?
1, 2, 3.
I must fall.
I don't know, mine bounced like 7.
So Josh's was still bouncing after Oops's. So that just proves kind of a...
That says pinky though.
It kind of proves that just the heavier something is, the less impact it's going to take. Or the more impact it's going to take, but the less it's going to move.
Good?
Yep. Good. I just put that in there. That kind of gives you relevance to something not saying that you guys don't understand this, but that was just an experiment that I thought maybe would help, you know, familiarize you guys with how that works. Like I said, you've seen it, the smaller one bounced more than either one of them, but the heavier one didn't bounce as far. So that's basically what I got. I don't know, you know,
Questions?
everybody has their own opinion. Personally, I think a bigger car is going to save my life. So yeah, anybody got questions?
Pretty thorough.
All right.